All right, it's 7:15. Hi, this is Scott. Let me turn this up. ND4L, welcome to the Greensboro Amateur Radio Association General Meeting. This is going to be a little awkward because I'm trying to talk into a microphone for the stream and on the repeater all at the same time with this radio. I guess I could have maybe come up with a cable to pipe them together, but I didn't do it. Glad the stream is working. Had a few issues a few minutes ago. If you would like to see what's going on this evening, we're going to be doing this the net on the repeater, but you'll also be able to, if you go to w4gso.org, on the homepage there is a let's see here. I can probably show it on this on the screen. If you're there, you're there. If you go to w4gso.org, on the homepage and click on the first news item about the meeting this evening, there's a embedded player for live YouTube video that I'm streaming right now. You should be able to see me. Unfortunately, you have to look at me. Um, Know something better. But in any case, like we have in the past, the way this meeting will work, we're going to go ahead and get check-ins from board members first. And once we get to check-ins from board members, we'll get some reports, and then I'll move on to showing you some basics about FT8, which is what the presentation is on this evening. Hopefully everything is working very well, and if not, I guess somebody will probably tell me. So let's go ahead and get check-ins from board members first. Um, just to give you all a heads up on how we take check-ins if you haven't been on a net very much before. Call net control unkey to make sure you're not doubling or talking on top of someone else. Once you're sure you're all by yourself, come back to me with your call sign and your name. Tell me your name so that I know what to call you. I know what to call the board members, but not everybody else. So, like I said, we'll take board member check-ins first, and we'll get some board reports. If you're a board member and you'd like to check in, please call net control now. All right, Net would like to recognize David AC4A, Jesse K4AX, and Matt KX4TG. Do we have any other board members around who would like to check in so that we can get some board reports? If so, call Net Control. Oops. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get some reports from these guys, and then maybe some more will check in a little while. First up, actually, Um, let me give you. Do I have any updates? I'm not sure that I do. I'm going to let David talk about field day. I can give you one update. We're still waiting on approval. The place that we're looking at having it, we're still waiting on approval. I sent them insurance information, some other information today. Hopefully tomorrow we'll hear something. But David, AC4A, ND4L, please go ahead with your report. All right, David. Very good. Thank you so much for your work and efforts, getting us set up for field day and for all the insurance and all that stuff. It's really crucial and critical because we know we have a lot of investment in equipment, and of course for events, making sure that we have liability insurance is really important too. So thank you for that, and yeah, appreciate that very much. All right, next up is Jesse K4AX. Thanks for being here, Jesse. I hope you're doing great. Please go ahead with your report for the evening. Yep, Matt checked in just behind you. It's ND4L with GARA General Meeting. Very good. Well, thank you for all your work and effort on the DMR side. I know that we've been talking about making some static talk groups or at least something that's scheduled out there. I think it would be good to come up with a list so that it's not just a free for all, at least on one of the time slots. But you guys are doing a lot of good work on that. I appreciate that very much. And have a safe drive on the way home. All right, next is Matt KX4GG. Please go ahead with your comments. Yes, ND4L with the GARA General Meeting. Well, thanks, Matt. Thanks for all the work you guys have put out there. It's work in not just in terms of the putting stuff out there and working on it, but research and time and effort and trying to figure out what will be the best and trying to find good deals and things that won't cost the club a lot of money and all that kind of stuff. Really much appreciated. There's a lot of legwork up front, and then of course the engineering that happens when you put it all in and have to make it all work. So appreciate that very much. Glad that it's all working so well, and it's doing really well for us. All right. Well, that's the last board member that I have check in. Are there any other board members, GARE board members, who wants to check in tonight to give a report? If so, please call net control. All right, I'm not hearing anything. So we're going to go ahead and take general check-ins. I'm going to take check-ins by the first letter of the suffix of your call sign. For those of you who may be new, that would be the bit after the number in your call sign. So my call sign is ND4L. Mine would be Lima. I'd have to wait to the group with Lima in it. Just as a reminder, I am streaming this on YouTube at the same time. There's a little bit of a latency, so it may be good to turn the audio down on YouTube while we're talking on the repeater. And then I think maybe once I start the presentation, I'll still key up the repeater. Some people who can't watch YouTube can listen, but if you're actually watching YouTube, it might be good to turn down your radio. Probably drive you crazy to have a latency. In any case, we're going to take general check-ins now. So let's take check-in call sign suffixes alpha through golf. If that's you and you'd like to check into the meeting this evening, please call net control now. Do we have any other check-ins for the GARA general meeting? Call sign suffixes alpha through golf, call net control. Net would like to recognize W1GY. Good to hear you, Bill. Appreciate you being here. All right, let's go on to call sign suffixes hotel through Papa, H through P. If you'd like to check in, please call net control. All right, very good. And would like to recognize Chris K4HC, Tommy KQ3H, Dan N2LGH, and Mark W4OVT. Any other check-ins, call sign suffixes, hotel through Papa, call net control. All right, I would like to also recognize Keith KX4KT. Thanks so much for being here. All right, let's take call sign suffixes Quebec through Zulu, Q through Z if you'd like to check in to the net. You don't have to be a member, by the way. If you're not a GARA member, doesn't matter. Just go ahead and check in. Q through Z, please call net control. All right, would like to recognize Charlie KN4YFL. All right, let's take check-ins. Anybody, anywhere, any call sign suffix. Doesn't matter who you are or if you're a member or as long as you have a call sign and your ticket, you can check in. Please call net control now. All right. Would like to also recognize John and for CNX. Appreciate you being here. All right. I'll take some more check-ins later on. Maybe some people will show up after a while. Before I move on to the presentation portion, does anyone have any announcements for the club? Anything you'd like to let everyone know? Any special events coming up? Anything like that? If so, call Net Control now. All right. Very good. Go ahead, Mark. This is ND4L. All right, Mark, that sounds great. Well, appreciate your efforts there. Sounds like it's been a little bit of a challenge to get that all lined up, but hopefully that will come together very, very soon and very well, and everything will just happen the way you want it to. So appreciate you letting us know about that. Look forward to hearing about that more in the future. By the way, I forgot to take Echo Link station check-ins. I forgot last time, and um, I think some people were a little bothered by that. So if you're an Echolink station, I don't have Echolink up to see if anybody's actually on there. If you're an Echolink station you'd like to check in, I'm going to give you 10 or 15 seconds to do that right now. ND4L. All right. I'm not hearing any Echolink stations. So I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about FT8. You're going to see my screen if you're watching YouTube. Right now you're looking at me, unfortunately. But I'm going to show you my screen, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it. And I know there are a lot of people out there who have run FT8 for quite a long time, and I've done it quite a while. And just because I've done it doesn't mean I have all the best practices, doesn't mean I have the best ways, doesn't mean I do it by the book either. So um, I'm hoping that if you have experience with this, you have a better way or a different way or something maybe I'm messing up that you can teach me. Just call me up on the repeater, interrupt me. Just say your call sign, and like I say, I'm gonna drop the repeater every so often. I'm gonna continue to talk on the repeater so people who don't have YouTube up can still hear it. But so we're gonna go ahead and get started, and yeah, just I'm gonna drop every once in a while and give you a chance to pipe up and tell me where I'm doing something wrong, because like I say, I don't profess to be an expert at this. All right, I'm gonna bring up my desktop. If you're watching YouTube, you should still be able to see it, to see the desktop. And anyway, um, so you can see FT8 WSJTX is running here. But before we get to this, uh, this is an application. I have it run on Windows, which I just put this computer together yesterday, actually, because I wanted to make sure I had a computer that was going to work for this demonstration. I was running Linux. This runs on Linux and Windows and different flavors of operating system. But really, if you go on Google and type up WSJT-X, you come to this page. It's kind of nondescript. This application was written by Joe Taylor and a bunch of other guys who update it pretty fairly often, I think. Um, you can download, there's documentation on this page. I've looked at it recently. And there are different explanations about how to do different things, but the installation packages for Windows are here. If you have Win 7, if you have 32-bit flavor or 64-bit flavor, you download that. If you have Linux, if you have a Debian installation, Ubuntu or Mint or one of those, you can download the deb file here, which is an installer for Linux. If you have Red Hat or Fedora or CentOS version, for example, you can download the RPM here and install it. Sometimes there are some dependencies. I've seen some things when I ran Linux, run this on Linux Mint for a really long time, and there could be some dependencies issues, like the curl version you're using, depending on what you're trying to do, upload to Logbook of the World and this kind of stuff. Went too long. In any case, so you download the executable and then you go ahead and install it. This runs as a standalone application, and one of the things I've been doing the past day and a half is I've been trying to get this ready for this demonstration tonight. Is figure out how to get this to integrate with my log. Now, since I'm new to Windows, I've been doing Windows forever. Since I'm new to Windows for ham work, I downloaded Log for OM. I know a lot of people use Ham Radio Deluxe. This is Log for OM. But part of what makes this a little bit more enjoyable experience, and I'm going to go through some of these settings here in a second, is trying to figure out how to get uh, cat control both in WSJTX and in your logging application, whatever it is. Let me stop and see if there are any comments so far, if I've missed anything, or if anybody has any questions. ND4L. Yeah, that's my understanding. I don't have anything that's a Mac, so I haven't gone out and looking for it. And I know that there is some ham software on Mac OS. Maybe there's something that emulates this. I'm not really sure. I've looked for something like this on Android because I'd like to run it on my phone or a tablet or something. And there isn't anything for that either. So my understanding is at this point there isn't anything in Mac land. I'm sorry about that, Mark. All right. Well, you never know. Some enterprising person may figure out a way to do it. Part of the thing that's interesting is that, this is developed and created by Joe Taylor and his crew at MIT. And, obviously Linux is probably a little bit bigger, although I would think that people in education were running Macs. But yeah, I'm not really sure what it takes to port a Windows application over to Mac or a Linux application. I would think Linux would be easier considering the relationship with Unix, but you never know. In any case, um, okay, so we've installed the application, and there's some things that we have to do to it to get it to work. The first thing that you need to know about WSJTX is that you're going to probably want a second sound card of some sort in your computer. Most people are going to want that sound card is going to have to connect to your radio because essentially FT8, JT65, all these other modes, all they are there is audio, is digital information that's modulated into audio, and that audio is sent via RF. So you need some way to get the audio into your rig. Most rigs have a data port on the backside. I thought about taking this webcam and showing the backside. I may take it and show the front side of my radio. I use an FTDX 1200, a Yaesu, by the way. And most rigs have a data port on the backside. The data port essentially is it's essentially audio. So you have an audio in and an audio out, and there are different control settings in the menus, and you can change things like that. But your computer has a built-in audio card, and that could be okay if you never intend. You can use that one if you never intend on listening to any other audio in your computer. you don't want to listen to videos, you don't want to listen to anything else, then that card could probably work okay as long as it's dedicated. But most people use their computer more general purpose than that. So you would want to use your standard audio card um, for your general purpose sounds, and then you have a second audio card for sending audio into your rig to transmit over the air. So in my case, I have a little USB dongle that I can't remember. I got it at Intrex, I think. It's one of these little. It's USB as tiny. It's got an 1/8 inch in and an 1/8 inch out. One for headphones and one for microphone. And I actually just popped it apart and I soldered 6-pin mini DIN cable in there, and I plug it in the computer. And if you want to use a Signal Link, if you want to use one of these other things like that, the MFJ has some interfaces. Those work fine. And the nice thing about those is they'll key up your rig for you if you don't want to run cat control. So did it again. So I have a secondary audio interface, and if I come down here, I'll show you. If I open my sound settings, um, let me see. It might be easier to see the volume mixer. You can see I have I have different applications here. Let me see. You can see I have the built-in. This is the built-in one. This little one that says C Media is the one that's used for my rig. It's the little USB audio interface, and this MGXU is a Yamaha mixer that has an audio interface built into it. Runs via USB. And that's how you're hearing me through the microphone. So I have the microphone plugged in the audio mixer. The audio is getting into the computer through USB cable, and then I have the software I'm using to stream using that. But the rig in WSJTX is using this one. Let me show you what that looks like. So the first thing you need to do is go into the file menu and into settings. And there are a number of settings on the general tab that I'm going to show you. These are kind of my own preferences. I'm going to show you these in a minute. But if we go to the audio tab, you can see I have input and output both set to C Media USB audio device. For input, I have it set on the left, and this is what I found that works for me. And you may have to play around with this once you get this up and running. I have output speakers to C Media USB audio device. So this is taking in from the radio, is listening to the radio, and sending to the radio. I have this set to both. One of the things I did notice, I was helping a friend of mine with WSJTX the other night. We weren't able to get his output working, so it was never keying his rig up, and I wasn't really sure why. I kind of had that problem today or yesterday, I can't remember. And one of the things that I did that ended up working, since I wasn't able to get sound out, I actually came in here. I chose one of the other outputs. So I can't remember, one of this, and then I transmitted, and I was able to hear the transmitted audio over my speakers. And obviously, it wasn't going to the radio at that point, but that's okay. At least I could tell that WSJTX was creating the sound, and I could hear it then. When I switched back to the proper device, then it started working. For whatever reason before that, it didn't. So it took me switching away and switching back in order to get the audio out. So this is the first thing you need to know. You need to have a second sound card, and in most situations, and that sound card is going to be dedicated to audio into your rig. You may need to play around with your rig a little bit. On mine, I have to set the for USB data. This is the mode that I choose on my radio. I have to choose the back connector, the rear connector on the radio. Otherwise, it would try to get the audio from the front connector. So you have to tell the radio to get the audio from the data connector on the back. And that's how I have mine set up. Yours may be a little different than that, but it's one thing to keep in mind. Another thing is that if you want to run cat control, I spent many hours on this last night. First of all, before I move on to that, does anybody have any questions about audio at this point? Andy Forel. All right. Since nobody has any questions about audio, we're going to go ahead and keep on going. So if you're not familiar with cat control, sometimes, before I got into messing around with digital modes, if you're running CW or without a logging application, you're doing it by hand. If you're running sideband and you're doing hand logging or even logging in a computer application manually, then there usually isn't too much of a need to have your radio talk to software. One of the nice things about having your radio talk to software is that when you do your logging, I'm going to slide this. If you're watching on YouTube, you're going to see this. I'm going to slide this window. This is the Log4OM logging software. I'm brand new to this, so I don't know very much about it. I was able to put some QSOs in here. So all these ones where you can see the country, these are the QSOs I made today. I screwed up somewhere here and have the frequency wrong, but it says 17 meters. I would think that anyway, I'll fix that later on. You can see I've made some QSOs here, but I'm not too familiar with this software yet. But in any case, you can see up here that it shows what frequency my radio's on. The nice thing is it automatically chooses the band, and it will automatically put the frequency in the log. And if you use some additional software when you're running FT8, it will actually put the call sign in here. So really, once you make a QSO on FT8, all you have to do is hit the button to add it to your log, and you're done. You don't have to actually manually type anything. So the software and the hardware that allows you to do that is called CAT, and I can't remember what it stands for. I just looked it up today. Computer something transceiver, whatever. In any case, it allows you to control your rig from the software, and in most cases, you're going to connect your radio up via serial cable. Now, some newer radios like the ICOM 73, IC 7300, and newer than that, and probably some of the newer AC radios, you plug them into the computer using a USB cable. You don't have to use an old 9-pin serial cable, but essentially they're still emulating serial. So if I go into this is one of the things I had a hard time with yesterday too. I actually have a PCI Express um, serial card, and um, for whatever reason, it's got one plug on it, but it shows two COM ports. I'm not really sure, so I disabled one, so I always knew which one I was using. But you can see I've got this is a serial port, PCI Express serial port in my computer. I would recommend, and Jesse and Mark and I were talking about this last night. I was using and have used in the past successfully USB to serial connection to communicate with the radio, but sometimes the USB cables can induce some current on the shield or different places. ND4L, and that can cause some issues with communication between the radio and the computer. If you have the capability to install a PCI card in your computer, or in this case, it's a PCI Express card. In my experience, and on my last computer that I had, just the one I just got through with yesterday, it had a built-in serial connection, and in my experience, that works better. And I think the other two guys kind of corroborated that. So, if you have the capability to use a built-in or a PCI Express serial card for CAT control, my recommendation is to do that rather than using a USB to serial connection. It can be done, but you may need to mess around with ferrites and all that kind of stuff to keep some noise off of the USB cable. So in any case, that's how I'm connected now. I have this PCI Express serial card. And if you see in how I have this set up now, I can actually switch this. I'm not going to do it right now because I'm going to really jack things up if I do that. But you can see here, it's got a whole list of all your rigs in it. I have FT1200 here, which is mine. And I can choose serial port 5 here, match the baud rate to what I have set up in the radio. The radio, you can change the baud rate and that kind of stuff. Turn on or off RTS. These things are generally going to be at default. And then your push to talk method will generally be CAT, and you're going to choose your COM port and all that kind of stuff too. This bit down here about mode, you can see if you hover over it, it gives a little bit of a, says, don't allow the program to set the radio mode. Um, you can choose if it's available, it's the correct mode for the program. So you can choose it. This is when you're using WSJTX, it will help set the radio to the correct mode. I generally kind of mess around the radio manually and put it where it needs to be, so I just leave that undone. Split operation. Um, Most of the time, what this means is this is going to change if well, you kind of have to know something about FT8 for this to make sense. We're not quite there yet, but what this means is that this will, when you transmit, will actually change the frequency on the radio rather than changing the frequency in the software. So I think generally you're going to leave this to none. In the past, I've used Fake It. This is something you'll just check or mess around with. ND4L, by the way. Are there any questions so far? Anybody want to bring anything up? All right. I guess not. Everybody is perfectly clear up to this point. That's good. All right. So what you see here is I'm using this thing called OmniRig. There are a couple of different ways that you can have multiple applications talk to your radio at the same time. Part of the problem is that if I just took rig and I put ACUFTDX 1200 in here and I chose a serial port here, then my logging program would not also be able to, the WSJTX would be hogging the serial port. So my logging program wouldn't also be able to connect to it. That's a problem because I want my logging program to see what frequency I'm on and all that, what mode I'm in and all that kind of stuff. I also want WSJTX to see all that. So I tried one in Linux. It's one called Hamlib. If you're familiar with Hamlib, it's these run over network protocols. They all run within your computer for the most part. I think you can have other devices on your network connect to them if you want to, but most of the time they'd all run within your computer. You may not have known that you can run your computer or run networking protocols simply within inside your computer, but you can. So these are applications or executables that are running. Sometimes they're services. They're little executables that are running in the background. They're listening on network ports, and so WSJTX actually. If you look here where it says UDP server on this reporting tab, I'm not going to get into this in too much detail. I'll just confuse everybody. But this is acting as a server. WSJTX is acting as a server, and there are other applications that will listen to WSJTX and get information from it. There are other applications that want to send information to WSJTX. So in any case, what we want is to have WSJTX to talk to our rig. We also want our logging application to talk to our rig. And there are little, essentially, network servers. One is called, like I said, it's called Hamlib. Excuse me. Hamlib is works probably best on Linux. I tried to run it on here and struggled to get my logging application could use Hamlib to talk to the radio just fine. It kind of sits as an intermediary. The logging application talks to Hamlib. Hamlib talks to radio. And then when you have WSJTX, it talks to Hamlib, and Hamlib talks to radio. Is kind of the point person in the middle. And Hamlib worked fine with my logging, but it didn't work at all. The WSJTX kept saying it couldn't connect. On Windows, there's another one called OmniRig. It's a little application. It's free, just like Hamlib is. You download it and you run it, and you put in your serial port information. It's running in the background. I don't know what I'm not sure what the executable is called. It may be down here in my task manager somewhere called OmniRig. I don't know if there's it. There it is right there. There's nothing in the taskbar. You can't see it. It's just an application that's running in the background. And when you set it up, I point WSJTX to it. You set OmniRig up, by the way, to talk to the radio using the serial port number COM5 is what I'm using. I set all this information up in OmniRig. So WSJTX talks to OmniRig, and OmniRig talks to my radio. And then I set my logging application up to talk to OmniRig, and OmniRig talks to my radio. So this is why right now you see I'm on 17 meters and on 18.100. And if I drag over my logging software, you can see it knows that I'm on 18.102 because they're both using this OmniRig. For whatever reason, it works a lot better. I've never used it because I didn't have Windows up to this point, but when I plugged everything up, it just worked great. So no issues there at all. So this is how I'm using cat control. So cat control, I can read my frequencies. I can actually change the frequency on my radio here if I want to. And then when I go to transmit, the PTT method I have set up as cat also, so it will use the serial connection to to put my radio into transmit mode. One thing that some people do, and I'm going to mention this. Wait for that to identify. There we go. If you don't use cat control, then what you can do is you can use Vox method, or sometimes DTR and RTS you can use if you're using some sort of an external audio interface. But most of the time, you're probably going to use Vox if you're not using cat control. Essentially, it's just like on your HT. When you send an audio signal to your radio, as long as that audio signal passes a threshold or goes over top of some threshold that you set in your radio, it will turn the radio to transmit. And this can be set up if you're using what do you call that little box? Any of those like MFJ boxes or signal link boxes. That's what I'm thinking of. Most of the time, when you plug them into your radio, they have the capability of keying the radio when they see a signal. So if they hear audio, and you may be able to set that in there, then they're going to key the radio up. Or if you're using like an external sound card like I am, that doesn't have the capability to key the radio in and of itself, then you can just set the radio to turn on Vox. And as long as the audio passes the threshold, then the radio will start transmitting. This is how I had it set up on my Linux. So even though I had cat control set up, for whatever reason, I never could reliably with hamlib, excuse me, get cat control to work. And so that meant that I ended up using Vox to key the transmitter, which is it worked out fine, and I never ever had any problems. When you're through getting everything set up, you can hit test cat here, and when it turns green, here's a little trick. When it turns green, you know that it's working okay. Okay? If it doesn't turn green, you have a problem. If I hit test PTT, it's going to key the transmitter, which it is. It turns red, and I click it again, and it turns the transmitter off. Now, there's no audio out to the transmitter, so I didn't actually transmit anything. It just turned the transmitter on. Of course, using upper sideband, if there's no audio, then it doesn't actually make any RF. A little bit more, and then we'll be out of the settings area. Are there any questions so far? Anybody have anything you want to bring up? All right, awesome. Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate that. Right. A couple more things. And the general tab, you will have to put your call sign in here. I think this may actually happen when you first install the application. Here's my grid. And there's some display and some behavior checkboxes that I like to use. You don't have to, but these are things that for me they work out best, and I can see things a little bit better. First of all, some of these things are unchecked by default. This is ND4L, by the way. Um, this thing that says blank lines between decoding periods. If you can see down here, see this blank line right here? It says 17 meters. It's got a bunch of dashes. If that's not checked, you're not going to see that. So the way that FT8 works specifically is it runs on 15-second intervals. You can see down here there's a little timer. It says 15 seconds, so it goes 15 seconds transmit, 15-second receive, or just 15-second receive cycles. I like to be able to see in here. I can't scroll up now because of this window, but I like to see in here where the one receive cycle stops and one receive cycle starts. And having that blank line there just kind of breaks that up for me. Another thing is normally where it shows the distance here down at this little window, so 7,598 miles. I was trying to work China just before the net started. I decoded China. I thought, you know what, if I can decode them, maybe I can make them. I've worked China recently, not on 17 meters, on 20 meters in the morning. But in any case, it's normally in kilometers. So if you want to see it in miles, check that box. TX messages to RX frequency window. I'll show you what this means in a second. But essentially, when you transmit, I'll explain what these messages are in a second. It'll make more sense. This one under behavior, it says double click on calls, sets TX enable. If you look over here, all these green guys, these ones that are in green, and this is if we say decoded text font, or there's some ways to set the colors in here. I'm not gonna show you all this. It gets in a little bit too much detail. These ones that are green, see it says CQ. These are guys calling CQ. So the other ones are guys who are actually in QSOs. So the CQ guys are usually the guys that you're going to want to respond to. You can respond to guys who are already in a queue. So here's a Japanese station. Maybe I want to get this Japanese station. I can, but I'm going to be stepping on him if I start transmitting right now. Whoever he's in a conversation with, I'm going to get in his way if I start transmitting, and I don't really want to do that. So normally I'm going to just like on sideband or CW, you're going to use it. You're going to respond to one of these CQ calls. ND4L. You can double click. If you double click one of these CQs, what it's going to do is going to move that over here, and then that's going to be the guy you're looking at that point. And I'm going to explain what all this means here in a second. But if you don't have this, if you have this checked, when you double click them, it will automatically put the program and set it so that it's ready to transmit, and will transmit on the next 15-second cycle where it can. I like this. It just makes it easier because then I don't have to click a separate button to put my radio into transmit. This one that says disable TX after 77, sending 73. Basically, when you're all through with the QSO, the last thing you say is 73. And when you're done with the QSO, you don't want to transmit anymore. You're done. You said goodbye. You're finished. There's no need to say anymore. I think this is not checked by default. I like that. It just means it takes the program out of transmit mode. This one that says calling CQ forces call first. I think that's checked by default. This one says TX Watchdog 6 minutes. When you set this on transmit, like this guy here, see it says KP4CR. He's calling this guy W0MB, and he's calling him over and over and over because this guy hasn't heard him or responded. If he's heard him, he hasn't responded yet. Like I said, I'm gonna tell you what all this means in just a second. So you don't want this to go indefinitely, like forever. So you can set a TX watchdog. That means after you've been transmitting for 6 minutes, which if you think about it, you're going to transmit, receive, transmit. So you're transmitting 2 times per minute, okay, because they're 15 seconds intervals. That means you will have transmitted 12 times by the time you get to 6 minutes. If you don't get a reply after 12 transmits, it's going to cut you off. You're done. It's not going to give you any more. And that's just so you don't sit there and transmit all night. You're not asleep and hours you transmit, and that would be bad. So, any questions up to this point, ND4L? All right. Well, we're going to move on. I'm going to show you what all this stuff means and how to actually operate it. This is ND4L. All right. Let me get out of here. Okay. Like I said, these green ones are guys calling CQ. What this is doing, this first column is showing you the time in UTC. One of the big critical things about running FT8 is that your time has to be very, very accurate. And the reason being is because everybody who's running FT8 is running on the same 15-second intervals. If you're 6 or 7 seconds off, that's half of this 15-second interval. And that means that you are going to be off from everyone else in the world. If you're listening to someone call CQ, or if you're transmitting back to him, you're going to be 6 or 7 seconds out of line with him. Most of the time on a Windows computer, your time is going to sync automatically with time.windows.com. If you're not familiar with NTP, Network Time Protocol, it'd behoove you to write that acronym down, NTP, and get to know something about it. You don't have to become an expert at it. You can actually run an NTP time server on your own machine if you want to. It will reach. So NTP works on a distributed server architecture. Essentially, there are time servers all over the world. And there are tier 1, tier 2, all these different things that connect to atomic clocks. So at the Naval Observatory in Bethesda, Maryland, there's an atomic clock. One in Greenwich, there's one in Colorado. NIST has some. So they're basically the time standards for the whole world, right? These atomic clocks are all synced together. And then you want your system to sync with those. So most of the time in Windows, it's going to sync itself to the time server. You probably don't have to do too much with it. In Windows, it's going to be okay. In Linux, depending on the flavor of Linux you have and what you're doing, you may have to manually set up NTP client, and then you may have to do this on Windows too. I think Jesse and Matt have suggested some in the past, but NTP clients you can run, and Chris, I think, has a good one if I remember correctly. That he uses. An NTP client reaches out to an NTP server. So as a pool of NTP servers, pool.ntp.org or 0.pool, 1.pool. They all are they're all accurate, and this client will reach out to the NTP server, say, "Hey, how far off am I from the accurate time?" The server, actually the client will say, "What's the time?" And then it will calculate how far off you are, and then it will fix your clock to make sure you're exactly on. Most of the time in Windows, unless you have a problem in a modern version of Windows like Windows 10, it's just going to work okay. Linux, you may have to do some fooling, but that's a big part of it. So in any case, in this very first column, you have UTC, Universal Coordinated Time. This is showing you the timestamp. So we're at midnight in 5 minutes and 15 seconds is what this 15-second interval is. This dB right here is showing you the relative signal strength of each of the people that you're decoding. Up here, you can see this waterfall graph. Each of these vertical bands is a person who is transmitting an FT8 signal. Now, one of the things you need to know about FT8 is that there are specific frequencies. I don't think the WSJTX homepage has it. Let's see here, FT8 frequencies. Most of them end in a 074. Okay, so let's see. Let's try QSL tonight. Here we go. So you can see here 14,074 for 20 meters, 21,074 for 15, 28,074 for 10, 7,074 for 40. 80 is a little different, 3,573. 30 meters is 10,136. 30 meters is a lot of fun on FT8, by the way. Especially in the morning time. Seems like it's like, obviously it's between 20 and 40, but seems like a good middle ground. I really like 17 meters on FT8 too. It sometimes has very little activity, and sometimes, like tonight, there's tons of activity. But 17 meters can be kind of a little bit of a long band, especially to Southeast Asia sometimes. But you can see these are the frequencies you want to set your radio at to work FT8 most of the time. Now, if you're working a DXpedition or some other special event station, sometimes they're going to be different than this. Like 7056 is a 40-meter special event or DXpedition. And 18.136, I've seen quite a bit of 17-meter FT8 there, even though it's kind of in the sideband range. People working FT8 there, DXpeditions and that kind of stuff. So you want to look up a chart like this and kind of get to know it. But in any case, you can see that starting at, I don't know why this keeps doing this. It doesn't matter. For whatever reason, WSJTX on Windows on this computer keeps putting my rig at, and maybe there's something in the settings somewhere. I got to look it up, but it 55 hertz down here at the end. ND4L. Before I go on, are there any questions? Anything anybody wants to know? All right. I know this is like blowtorch, like millions and millions of items of information. And you know what? I guess this will be on YouTube. So if you really want to go back through it and watch it again and get thoroughly confused, then that will be up to you. But in any case, each of these vertical bands is someone transmitting an FT8. If I want to see who this guy is here, I can actually click here on the left edge of his uh, on the left edge here, and this is so you can see we have well, I have my waterfall display set up this way. I have 3 bins per pixel. This will actually show you how change how wide the display is, and then the bands get wider or narrower. 200 hertz, 400 hertz, 600 hertz, 800, 1000, 1200, 1400. I would say 2 kilohertz is normally about what I like to see. So I usually leave this at about 3 because then the bands are slightly narrower and I can see more of the passband in this area here. I also this here where it says an average of 1. This is how often it's going to. This is how vertically sized it is. Let me put it this way. So if I put 3, you're going to see it's going to go slower and it's going to be narrower. I like to see, or narrower. I guess narrow is not the right term for up and down, but I like to see a little bit more. I like the waterfall to move a little more quickly, so I set this to 1 here. Now, all of this information here is coming from your sound card, right? So your radio is receiving audio. This is the audio spectrum down here, and let's see, what is this? So you can click up here. This green box is showing what you're receiving at that particular place, like this guy HI8MDQ. The red one on top is showing your transmit frequency. So the green 1200, what just below 1200 hertz is, you can see I got 1176 down here. If you're looking at the YouTube stream, you can see what I'm doing. If you're not, it's probably going to be a little challenging. But this is what I'm receiving. and this is at this place. The transmit where I'm transmitting is up here. Um, and obviously, the brighter yellow, the stronger the signal. So you can actually look in this graph here. What's -1? -1's the strongest signal so far that I see. If it's 0 or higher, it's really strong. So MI 0 SAI is really Andy 4L is pretty strong, and KP4CR, he's at 683, so he's down here. This is this guy, so you can kind of match up. The signal strength 1076 is, and I guess it's must be right in here. This is this guy. You can kind of match up the frequency here with the waterfall, and it just kind of helps you know who's where and what's going on. Um, Here's the signal strength. This is time drift here. How far off are they from your time? So we're a little less than a second off from my time. Okay. And which is pretty good. But obviously, if it's a couple seconds off, we're going to have some problems. But most of these are less than a second, no problem at all. Not an issue. You can also see your received signal strength down here. Now, I usually like to see this a little hotter, so I could probably turn the gain up or the volume on the radio up a little bit to come in here. But it's since the waterfall is showing me mainly dark with some blues and yellows, to me this looks fine. I'm receiving okay. I can probably get a little bit better, maybe some more sensitivity if I bring this up a little bit and make some adjustments and that kind of stuff. But I just installed this software yesterday, so I haven't really done anything with that. All right. Any questions up to this point, Andy Forel? Very good. Go ahead, Mark. I haven't made it there yet, but because I haven't quite made it to the transmit side yet. We'll get there just a second. But I can tell you, just like in good ham fashion, you want to use as little as possible. FT8 is a low power mode and weak signal mode. So really, and it really depends. How challenging do you want it to be? How far away is the guy? What are the band conditions at the time? Really an ideal situation, if you can use 35 watts to hit somebody in South America, that'd be fantastic. It probably you could in good band conditions, you can probably use less than that. When we start to get better solar cycle and band conditions, you probably can you work all over the world 35, 40 watts. When the band conditions are terrible, I can tell you that I worked, where did I, South Shetland Islands or something down by Antarctica. I really wanted to get that guy, and of course he was very popular because he obviously is not on the air very often. I think it was the D Expedition down there. Really, really wanted to get that guy, and I ended up turning my amp and running a couple hundred watts. Which to me, it's one of those things where you kind of got to do what you got to do. You want to work the station, you want to get him in your log. He's not hearing you. I've been on the air trying to get him at lower wattages for an hour, and it's just not happening. I don't see if I look on PSK Reporter, I don't see my spots anywhere south of Brazil. Okay, I'm going to up the wattage a little bit. So, I would say somewhere just to start out around 40 to 50, 60, somewhere like that. If it's not getting you there, you just keep going up until you make the contact. I guess that's how I see it. Does that help, Andy Forall? Yeah, no problem. So my rule of thumb is if I can decode him, I'm going to try to work him. I know that probably seems silly. Some of these, like you can see this VK2AA8 station right here. VK is Australia. So I'm on 17 meters. I'm decoding Australia. You can see I'm this because of the green thing here. This is his station But this is his signal, and I realize there's a latency. It's probably 30 seconds latency on YouTube, so it's going to be a second before you can see it if you're listening to me on the repeater. But it's pretty weak. It's barely visible in the graph. You see just you can make out that there's a band there, but it's not very strong. But if I look at his dBs, -23, -24. If I'm probably gonna have to use 100 watts to get him, but I think I could work him. This guy KZ4AK is trying. I don't know. I don't know exactly what power that guy is running, but you can see if you can when you see it on YouTube, you'll see he's obviously a little stronger than the VK station is. But so here's a Japanese station. He's at -22. So he's kind of down there too, but I could probably work him with 100 watts. If I really wanted Japan because I needed that for DXCC or whatever, and 100 watts just wasn't doing it, I'd probably run 100 if maybe put it this way: if I couldn't get him at 50 watts or 60 or 70 watts, and I'm trying for 100, and I've tried for 15 minutes to get this JA station because I really need to get him in my log. Then I'd turn on amp and just try to work him. We have up to 1500 watts. If you want to run it on 1500 watts, go to town. But generally speaking, the way I figure it is if I can decode him, he's transmitting, and my little meager dipole at 65, 70 feet is receiving a signal. Then whatever I send out of here, unless he's really running some major power, he should be able to pick me up too. Usually, if you're here in Southeast Asia or Australia or New Zealand or those areas, in the morning time or in the evening time is because the gray line or there's something else going on. So you should be able to grab them. All right, so you can see all these things are decoding. This is when we see all these things moving up. This is called a decode. This is every one of these corresponds to one of these vertical bands. Okay, and so now what I want to do, I want to work one of these guys. I don't want to just look at them and watch them go by. So the simplest way to do this, and okay, one thing to know. Actually, let's talk about the sequence before we get on into transmitting. A couple different little tidbits. One is if I double click on one of these. Andy 4L with the GARA General Meeting. If I double click on one of these guys that's calling CQ, because I set this option in settings that says double click on call sets TX enable. If I double click on one of these guys, you're going to see him pop up in the RX frequency window, and it's going to click enable here, enable TX, and then the next time I have a chance, my radio is going to go into transmit. Okay, so let's talk about what these codes and these messages mean first of all, because this is a part of transmit. All of these things are related to transmit. We have receive and transmits down here, and I'm going to go through the basics. I'm not going to get into details. I'm not going to get into Foxhound mode. You can look that up on your own later. Some of this, if you were working with an earlier version of WSJTX, this whole thing was a little bit longer. It's actually been reduced by one in, I think, since WCATX 2, if I remember correctly. But essentially, if I double click, what is going to happen is whoever is here, and let's go ahead and work this guy, this guy's down in South America, I think. Um, he's not that far away, 1,370 miles, but it takes so I've just double clicked, it puts his call here. This is DX call. This is the grid he's in. And it puts his call over here in the RX frequency window. The yellow is me transmitting this line to him. And what I'm transmitting, he's calling CQ, I'm transmitting his call sign, then my call sign, and then my grid square. So you're going to see there's a sequence to these things. The way FT8 works is it goes in order. Another thing to know, another tidbit, is that you generally speaking, the way this is supposed to work, and this is not how I've always ran it. So I'm going to tell you how it's supposed to work and how I've done it. Generally, you set your radio to its full maximum output power, which is for my radio is 100 watts. And then you'll see here, I can adjust the audio level that's being sent to my radio. And that audio level adjustment will adjust how much power is actually being transmitted by my radio. You'll want to make sure that when you have this thing all the way to the top, either turn off ALC or make sure you're not really hitting ALC automatic level control, that basically compresses your audio signal and keeps it from being too strong. All right, there, we just worked them. So you can see it, enable TX just went away. And that's because he said 70, I said 73, he said 73. I'll show you what that means in a second. We're done with the QSO, TX is disabled. But in any case, generally you keep your transmitter at 100 watts and you adjust your power output here. And you can look at the meter on your radio to figure out how much power you're putting out. Andy, for any questions so far? The guy is in Dominican Republic. I just had to put him in my log. I have an application called JT Alert that will automatically put that in the log for me, but because I'm not running it right now, it would confuse the situation. So I don't have it going on. But Dominican Republic, that's who that guy is. So what this means, so what happened here? What do all these things mean? I can change. Oh, look at. Hello, Matt. Let's here's KX4GG working me right in the middle of our little YouTube video. That's cool. So this guy says CQ. I have next. Normally it would be next here. I'm going to send him my grid square. He's going to come back to me with this red one is him transmitting to me, and he's telling me my signal report. My signal report is plus 0.5 dB, which is really strong. Anything above 0 is pretty strong, so that's pretty good. So I am not going to transmit just his signal next because he just transmitted this to me. What I'm going to transmit next to him is Roger, R, and then transmit his signal report back to him. So this is why it says R plus 11. So this is the sequence. He called CQ. I called him with my grid square. He heard me and transmitted my signal report. I say, Roger, here's your signal report. Ooh, who's this guy? Let me put KX4GG in my my log here before I forget about it. 17 meters FT8. All right. All these cool QSOs. Everybody's seeing me. This is messing my presentation up. So I say, Roger, here's your signal report. You're really strong too, plus 11. And by the way, these signal reports, this is WSJTX will do this for you. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to ask anything. It will automatically do all of that. Ooh, somebody from Venezuela is trying to work me too. And then after I say, here, Roger, here's your signal report, he'll say, Roger, Roger, 73. That's here. I don't need to say that. I'm just going to say 73 back. So you can see that these boxes are going in sequence. The program will automatically move from the correct box to correct box depending on whether or not you're calling CQ and responding to CQ, or whether you are the one who's responding to somebody else's CQ. So it will automatically advance from box to box to box. You don't need to do that on your own. So let's see. I don't know who JH7CVM is. Who is this? Japan. I guess I should have known with Japan. Okay, he's not. So you can see here's a good example. He's calling me. He's saying my he's calling me with his grid square. I'm calling him back and saying, "Hey, buddy, you're a minus 13. That's not too bad. It's not super strong, but it's not too bad." And then the next time he didn't hear me, so I said, "I'm going to say it again. I'm going to repeat myself. You're negative 16." He didn't hear me again. Oh, let me repeat myself. He just said Roger, because he got me. He heard my where I said negative 13. I'm the yellow. I'm transmitting the yellow. And he said, Roger, you're minus 24. So minus 24 is getting down there. But he still decoded me. And I'm saying, okay, Roger, Roger, 73. Thank you for hearing me. And what he'll come back the next go round is he'll say 73. And that will be the end of the QSO. And obviously, it just disabled TX for me, because for my part, I just said Roger, Roger, 73. That's the end of the QSO for me. Because even though I wasn't calling CQ, he called me. So he ended up here. So the sequence of these will depend on whether you're calling CQ or answering CQ. Let me go ahead and put him in the log. This worked Japan live on the air. That's good. ND4L, any questions so far? All right, one of the things you might notice here is that I was hearing this guy at 1056 hertz. I was transmitting at 1178 hertz. I was transmitting on the same frequency that I had this QSO with the guy in, what was he, Dominican Republic? I was on this frequency. This guy called me on a different frequency. That's an interesting concept and something you want to keep in mind. If I want to respond to one of these guys over here, if I double click on his call sign, what it's going to do is it's going to put I'm obviously receiving him at 573 hertz. It's going to put my radio to transmit at the same frequency he's listening or he just transmitted on. So the red and the green ones will be lined up automatically. If I double click this, it puts it over here. Sometimes there are a whole bunch of people calling the guy calling CQ all at the same time, and they're all trying to call him on the same frequency he's transmitting on. Okay, so let's see if we can work this guy while we're talking. Let's let it do its thing. ND4L, by the way. Um, so you can see I'm still stuck on the same frequency. I heard him on 1272. 1272, whatever is happening up here, there was something here, and sometimes you want to transmit on a different frequency than the guy is transmitting on who's calling CQ. It could be that there's a whole bunch of guys calling CQ at the same place as him, and it doesn't matter where your signal ends up on this passband. If your call sign's in it and his call sign's in it, it's going to decode for him over here. So you can see there's obviously something strong happening here, right about where I'm transmitting. So let's see. What if I come up here around 1400? Now you can see the red, the transmit frequency is in a place that's relatively clear. Now this guy may have gone. He may not be there anymore, so he may not respond to me. Oh, more often than not, what I have noticed in all of my experience is that I will call this guy and he won't. He just got up to use the bathroom or something. And if I stop calling him now, then it could be 3 or 4 minutes down the road, or maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Sometimes he comes back, sits down at his computer, sees a bunch of red in this window because he sees that his call sign's in here, and that somebody's calling him, and then he'll respond to me. And you know what? Then if he's around and I can see it, then I can respond back to him, and hit enable and go through the whole sequence. So um, yeah, one of the lessons to learn, you don't always have to transmit on the same frequency the guy is calling CQ on. Sometimes it's better to transmit. Sometimes it's better. This is ND4L, by the way. Sometimes it's better to. Oh, well, that's hilarious. I guess I just completed the QSO with him. He must have. He must have done. We must have done. I don't know how exactly. I had to go back and look at all this. How exactly that happened, but somehow he's saying 73 to me, and I don't remember him responding to me the first time with it. I guess the first thing was a signal report. Weird. Anyway, there you go. Just made a QSO with Venezuela. YV50IE. There we go. All right, Venezuela. And put that in log. So there you go. This is the basics of how to do this. One of the things, a couple of these buttons down here, just so you know what these are all about. ND4L, by the way. This one that says TX even first. What this basically means is if you're calling CQ, and this really is about calling CQ, you can call CQ on an even time number that would be at the top of the minute or at halfway through the minute. So in other words, right at what time are we at now? We're at 8:29. 8:29 and 40 seconds. I could call CQ at 8:29:45, and that would not be even. That would be odd. So this thing will not call CQ on an odd time sequence if that's checked. Okay, so that's what that's all about. Hold TX frequency. What this means is that if you're calling CQ and somebody else responds to I think the program will go to their frequency. If you click hold TX frequency, you're going to keep calling CQ and respond him on the same frequency all the time. That can be helpful if you don't want to lose that frequency. You're here. You know it's clear. You've been working it for an hour. You don't want everybody to come and take that from you. You just leave that checked. Auto sequence obviously is what we were just talking about, where you go from message to message to message automatically, depending on whether you're calling CQ or answering a CQ. And call first, what this means is if you're calling CQ and this is checked, and you decode somebody responds to you, then the program will automatically start the sequence to respond to that guy. You don't have to click any buttons to do anything to respond to him. If this is unchecked, you have to do some manual things. So one of the things to know is when this enable TX button, and this happens sometimes, I've noticed this, is that this guy will say RR73, the guy you're calling, and then you send 73, and guess what? The program goes out of enable because I have that box checked in the settings. Um, the problem is it's not TX anymore. That guy says RR73. What he really wants to hear is a 73 from me, and he's not decoding a 73. So guess what? I have to click Enable TX again. And then in order to get to this 73 so that I'm transmitting this line, then once Enable TX is checked, I can click this guy, or I can actually click it first. See how that says next? That's selected, that radio button selected. Now, if I hit Enable TX, it's going to transmit that message. So sometimes you have to manually, at the very end of a QSO, you may have to hit Enable TX and send 73 multiple times because that guy, for whatever reason, didn't decode your 73, and he really wants to hear it. And he's going to sit there and say, RR, Roger, Roger, 73, until he hears 73 from you. So there you go. I think that pretty well covers all of the basics. Let me just mention one thing about Foxhound mode for DXpeditions. Actually, before I do that, let me see if there are any questions. ND4L, anybody have anything you want to bring up? All right, very good. Thanks. Go ahead, Matt. Yeah, very good. ND4L. I'm not sure if those of you, if you're just watching on YouTube, I'm not sure if you heard what Matt said. I don't have that radio piped into the mixer so you can hear it, but he essentially said that a lot of times people think that FT8 is not a very interactive mode. You can just set the computer and forget it, and it just goes, and you don't have to do anything, and it's not real ham radio, and you're not talking, you're not hitting a key to send CW or something like that. And the fact of the matter is, you still have to pay attention. If you just get up and decide you don't really want to pay attention, somebody could be calling you. You might have two or three people calling you, and you may miss something, or you may jam something up, or you really can kind of create a mess. So you have to pay attention, and you have to know what these different things are. Like I said before, at the end of the QSO, you may mess things up if that guy doesn't hear you or whatever. So there's interaction, and you do have to pay attention to it. And it may not be directly hearing the guy's voice or hearing a dit or a da that he sends with his key, but you are actually having to pay attention. You might have seen me messing around. These things here, these sliders adjust the brightness and the gain on the waterfall. One of the things that Matt put on the hangout a little bit ago was how it's interesting how the gain shows up and how different it looks. This is essentially how it looked for me in Linux too. It looked very much like this. It could be related to the sound card. I could have a noisy sound card, or maybe my radio is noisy, and or maybe I just have noise here, and you see a lot of blue in the background. Could be that any number of things, but you can adjust this to suit your liking. based on your own preferences. All right. So since that was a great comment, since there aren't any other questions, let me quickly move on to Foxhound mode, and then we're going to wrap this up because we've been going for a while. Foxhound mode is a mode that was developed, and I think version 2 is where it started. So we're on 2.1.2 in WSJTX. Foxhound mode. Oh, by the way, before we get into that, you can see I was in enable, right? This is just something interesting, so you'll know. I was calling VK2AH in Australia. I sent him. my grid square. The program decoded that he VK2AH responded to this guy K1ACT, and guess what? Took my radio out of enable. You don't want to continue to transmit when this guy obviously responded to his CQ, or somebody else responded to his CQ, and he's responding back to that person. It would be kind of rude just to continue to transmit on top of them and mess that QSO up. So your radio or your the software will automatically disable this TX mode. If you By the way, just so you can see it, this halt TX, if you're enable TX and you need to stop transmitting for whatever reason, maybe you realize that he's in a QSO and you decided to transmit anyway, halt TX. If you click off enable TX, it's going to finish sending whatever it's sending. So if I have enabled TX, now I'm going to try where he said RR73. That guy is probably going to say 73 now, and then he'll come back with a CQ. If I leave, well, he didn't hear him. If I leave enable TX clicked, it's going to finish sending. If I want to stop the transmission before that 15 seconds is up, I can hit halt TX and it will stop right then. Just so you know how this works. Enable TX. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this because presumably he'd heard the 73 and he's probably going to call CQ the next time around anyway. It's fairly weak. You can see him here on the graph. If I wanted to stop it, I would just hit halt TX. All right, there you go. He called CQ. I'm going to try for him in Australia. 17 meters, pretty good tonight. Right. So if I go into settings, I'm going to show you where it says radio. One of the times you want to use split mode is when you're working a DXpedition, okay? Because we have what's called Fox and Hound. This mode here, where this checkbox here, special operating activity. If I check it, I am going to be the Hound. The DXpedition is the Fox. Obviously, hounds chase foxes. All right. One of the nice things about um, I'm not going to hit OK because I've jacked up this key, so I'm trying to make happen. But if I hit OK, what this means is that I am going to be the hound chasing the fox. The fox can transmit multiple signals back at the same time. If you're working in fox mode, that you need to know how to do this. There's some special things you need to do. But in any case, I can transmit 4, 5, 6 streams all at the same time of audio, responding to 4, 5, or 6 different operators all around the world, all at the same time. That's what makes this mode so good. If you were just doing one at a time in FT8, it would take a really long time because you're only essentially working one station every minute because there are 4 goes back and forth 4 times. 1 a minute is okay, but it's not a very fast QSO rate. What if you could work 4 every minute? Well, look he picked me up. He's negative 15. That's not bad. Or I am. Wait for the repeater to identify. So, what if you could transmit to 4 or 5 different guys at the same time, work 4 or 5 different stations simultaneously? Well, that's what this is meant to do. So you check this box, you call it Hound. I'm the Hound, okay. In the radio, we need to change it to split because what's going to happen in Fox and Hound mode is that the Fox is going to be transmitting down here somewhere around 300 hertz, okay? Somewhere down here. Now, like I said before, the FT8 frequency is going to be different than the standard 18.100 and 17 meters like 18.136, I think. But he's going to be transmitting down here. What you want to do, along with everybody else, is transmit way up here, somewhere around 1,000, above 1,000, excuse me. So you're going to choose something that's open. So for me, I might choose 16, 18, 2,000, maybe even higher. One of the things that Chris K4HC has taught me is go high, 2,200, 2,400, somewhere up in there. He's going to be listening, and he's going to decode your signal. Everybody else is transmitting in this area. Go somewhere where they're not. And there's a better possibility he'll pick you up. So what you want to do though, because you're listening split, and the split means you're way far away from him. What's going to happen is when you transmit, then you don't want to just transmit way up here the whole time. You want to come down to where he is to respond to him when he comes back. He's going to see Q. You're going to be up here transmitting to him. He's going to pick your call sign, and then what you want the program to do is to change the frequency you're transmitting on to be by where he is on the frequency that he's transmitting on. So if you choose split operation, you could do it on rig. I've had very good success with fake it. It will actually change the frequency on the rig if you have this chosen the cat set up correctly. Fake it means you don't have cat set up correctly, and it will do it in software. So that's how FT8 or excuse me, how Foxhound mode works. The one thing you want to remember, and I've done this many times more than I want to count, is if you work in Foxhound mode because you work in a D expedition or special event station, ND4L, and uh, you go back to work in regular FT8, you want to turn off Foxhound mode. And he obviously didn't pick me up. Something happened there. So he's working somebody else. So see, I just hit Halt TX. I just noticed he's working somebody else. It was still in enable. It didn't take me off enable. I hit Halt so that I wouldn't step on this guy, even though I was working him before. So just make sure to turn off Foxhound mode when you go back to working regular old standard FT8. So I think that gives you a pretty good overview and gives you a way to start out with this. It takes a little bit of learning. You can see there's a bit of a flow to this. There's a little bit of a nuance to it. It's not always the simplest thing right up front, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be scary. And one of the things, first time I ever saw WSJTX, I was like, "What is all of that? That is petrifying. I don't know what any of it is." And I'm afraid that if I start transmitting, I'm really going to mess something up and somebody's going to get really, really angry with me. But hopefully that makes this all a lot simpler and makes it so that you can go out and do this on your own and enjoy FT8 as much as a lot of us have in the area. All right. We've talked about power. We've talked about transmitting. We've talked about all this stuff. We talked about receiving. We talked about frequencies. We've talked about the waterfall. We talked about graphs. We've talked about the setup. We've talked about downloading. Going backwards through my head. Oh, look at that. Hello, Jesse. K4AX. All right. So I think I've covered the vast majority of it, gone a little bit over time, but everybody's at home, so you should be okay. So with that, are there any questions or anything else you would like me to explain? If so, yeah, just give me a call, ND4L. All right. Very good, Dan. Please go ahead with your question. I think sometimes special event stations will work that way, and it really depends. I know there are a bunch of these stay-at-home special event stations all over the place, and I think sometimes they'll do Foxhound mode. But generally speaking, in my experience, the vast majority of what I've ever seen work in Foxhound are the expeditions. I think that special event stations will, if they anticipate having a big pileup. Really, Foxhound mode is meant to prevent a giant pileup and make it so that they can work as many stations as they can at one time. And if they're only working for 1 or 2 days because it's a special event, I could see them doing that. But generally speaking, outside of those two, I've never seen anybody work Foxhound. And there was one time I don't remember what I did. I screwed something up, or maybe I upgraded WSJTX, and I had that enabled. And I had instead of enabling in Hound mode, I had it in Fox mode, and it was because I had just upgraded and I didn't realize I had defaulted to the wrong thing. And I couldn't get WSJ2X to work at all. And I think there are special instructions for how to do that. I don't think it's impossible for a normal operator to do that, but I think that you have to know something a little more than I do in order to be able to run it in Foxhound mode as the Fox. So, does that help at all? All right, very good. There we go. Work, Jesse. Got it. Plus 15. That's really fantastic. I wonder how come he must be shooting over top of me. All right. Anybody else have any questions before we hang this thing up for the evening? Andy for all. Yeah, that's good. There you go. I just pulled it up and probably like because of the latency, it probably take a second on YouTube, but you can see what Jesse's talking about. You have tabs 1, 2, and 3 here. The biggest reason to use this one is so you can actually see what the messages are. If you click here on number 2, you can actually just click, to answer a particular message. If you see R plus 15 and you want to respond 73, then you can just click 73 here. You don't have to. It is a little awkward just to hit the TX button here and to choose this particular one. You can come here and just hit the button. That's what Jesse was talking about. And I'm not really sure. I guess you can send non-standard messages in that one, but there you go. That's definitely an option. Sounds like a really good and simpler way to go. Thanks, Jesse. Any other questions or comments or thoughts or I love stuff like that because I'm not accustomed to doing it this way, but it definitely is something I'm going to try out. Andy Forel. All right, very good. Good to hear you, Carl. I'm going to put you on the list. Go ahead. That's fantastic. Well, congratulations, Carl. Wonderful. It's nice to see that somebody else will be on here. Good that you were able to decode him, and that's the first step. If you can decode him, then you know your sound card's working right. All right, very cool. Anybody else before we close the meeting tonight? ND4L, please call now. All right, anybody else who just wants to check into the meeting, even if you don't have a comment about FT8, call now. I'm not sure I caught that. Can you come back one more time? All right, excellent. Well, thanks for being here tonight. Appreciate you joining us. Anybody else who wants to check in? ND4L with the GARA general meeting. All right, very good. Go ahead, Mark. All right, very cool, Mark. Well, you know what? I just pulled up the WHATX page, and you're right. There's a Mac OS DMG file on there, and if I'd have looked, I came to this page early on to show that there were Linux versions, and if I'd have looked, yeah, look, there's a Mac version. I think you're right about PSK31. I think that the FL Digi or something isn't available, but there you go, perfect. Now you Mac users can enjoy FT8 just like all the rest of us. All right. Any other comments or thoughts? Last call, Andy 4L. All right. Well, with that, um, I'm not going to call for a motion to close the meeting. I'm just going to go ahead and close. I hope everybody's okay with that. I guess you can fire me if you don't like it. So I'm going to say 73. This is ND4L closing the GARA general meeting. Appreciate y'all being here. Keep an eye on the feed line and other communications messages about what we do next month. I'm not really sure. We're going to have a conversation as a board about, now places can start to have people in them and maybe still be a little too early. Actually, next month is field day. So I think keep an eye out for field day. We might not have to worry about it in terms of a general meeting because normally we have a general meeting at field day. So keep some eye out for that info anyway. Glad I remembered that. Maybe in July we'll get back to the swing of things, depending on how things look everywhere. But of course, we're gonna stay. We're gonna just be as careful as we can and do the social distancing thing, and we want to make sure everybody stays healthy. So anyway, I appreciate you joining us. Hopefully, this all turned out okay on YouTube. I can't watch it myself as I'm transmitting or streaming, so hopefully it worked out okay. And I hope you all have a great evening. So for now, this is ND4L closing the GARA general meeting, saying 73, and I hope you all have a really great evening and a great week. Stay healthy, and we'll catch you later on. 73 ND4L. Go ahead, Carl. You caught me. Okay, cool. We will work that out and figure out exactly how to make that happen. Thanks for the reminder, ND4L.